When the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, hears about the death of his two sons, Nadav and Avihu, they had actually brought an offering in the tabernacle at that time, and a fire came from heaven and consumed them. What was the reaction of Aaron? His reaction is, Vayidom, he remained in silence. What could he do? Could he question God, God's infinite wisdom? Man cannot do that. And he was a very religious man. But on the other hand, was he at peace with himself? Wasn't he angry? He had no way of expressing really his anger, his tremendous pain. And maybe he remained silent, but it was an active silence. He was actually angry and he couldn't express his anger. We find that speaking is very common in the Torah. We hear all the time, Vaydaber Moshe, Moshe spoke, Vayomer Moshe, Moshe said. All the time there is speaking. As a matter of fact, according to our rabbis, the difference between man and the rest of the creatures is that man speaks. That was what God gave him in the very beginning, when he gave some of him, part of himself, into the nostrils of the human being, is Vayipach be'apav. He actually gave him the possibility of speaking. So speaking is very important. You know, the 10 commandments in the Torah are called Aseret Hadibrot, the 10 sayings. So you see that speaking is very important. Yet we find in Shema Israel, which is a prayer really, that we repeat twice daily, it says, Shema Israel, listen Israel. Obviously, listening is very important. Maybe listening is more important than speaking at times. But yet, I want to tell you today that I think that speaking is also very important, because silence many a time is a sign of a lack of communication between two people. You know, the Torah tells us that Jacob comes to Egypt and he meets his son Joseph, and Joseph falls on his neck and starts crying. But the Torah doesn't say that Jacob is crying. What does the Torah say? Why is he silent? Because he was saying Shema Israel. It was the time of the day when you're supposed to say that prayer. Very strange. You know, you meet your son after many years that you have been apart. You thought that he was dead, and suddenly you see him alive for the first time. So you're saying a prayer? He really should have said something else. But he says Shema Israel. I really owe this to Rabbi Dov Linzer, who is one of my favorites. Yaakov says to Joseph, you know, I can now die in peace because I have seen your face. What does Joseph say? I am going to tell Pharaoh that you, my father, and my brothers came. It seems like a non sequitur. One thing has nothing to do with the other. They're not really conversing. They're not really relating one to the other. Why not? Well, maybe Yaakov is thinking to himself, you have been in Egypt already a number of years. Okay, you were in jail. In jail, you couldn't communicate with me, but it's already 7 years. You know, the good years of abundance. You were second to Pharaoh. Why didn't you speak to me? Why didn't you get in touch with me? But he doesn't say it. Maybe Joseph was thinking, Father, why did you send me to look for my brothers who are far away from home? Didn't you know that they hated me? They could harm me? What about all these years? Why didn't you look for me? How do you know that I was dead? Why didn't you look for me? Well, these things were not said. One was saying one thing, the other was saying something else, but they weren't really speaking to the things that were really bothering them. You know, I think that many a time in our human relations, we don't say what we really should. You know, Jacob is very sick. So Joseph comes to see him with his two sons, Ephraim and Menashe. So Yaakov looks at them, he says, who are these? What do you mean, who are these? Those are your grandchildren. You don't know your grandchildren of your beloved son Joseph? Well, maybe the relationship between Yaakov and Yosef was not really what it should have been because they didn't speak to one another about the things that really bother them. I think that many a time this is a problem in marriages, in all kinds of human relationships, that we speak superficially. We speak about what is apparent and we don't go down deep to the issues that really bother us. So think about it. Think about what you want to tell somebody with whom you have a relationship. Bare your heart. Tell them really what bothers you, because only in an honest and true interchange of feelings can a relationship become deeper and closer to one another.